in the chamber, the Speaker has announced that he is admitting the motion that I indulge him to admit for me to move, but he will take it tomorrow. So tomorrow, God willing, when we come to the House, we'll be given the opportunity to move the motion. And as the terms of the motion indicate, we want to ask His Excellency the President to take urgent steps to suspend the application of the payment of fees this year because of the COVID circumstances and its impact on household incomes, and consequently the ability of students who have been given admission to pay the fees, and of parents to also be able to pay the fees. I expect to get a bipartisan support on this matter because it is a reality that COVID has constrained household incomes to the extent that the President, in implementing some measures, has included paying the water bills of families for them, paying the electricity bills of families for them. And if things are so bad that the state is taking on the payment of water bills and electricity bills for households, can you imagine the implications for household incomes to request them to pay fees to tertiary institutions? And if you look at the fees that many of them are requested to pay, they range from between 2,500 to 4,500. And I know some courses where they are asked to pay close to 6,000 Ghana cedis. And these are fees that I believe most families in these COVID circumstances will not be able to pay. So we're urging the President to immediately take steps to suspend the application of the fees and charges, miscellaneous provisions, LI, so that the students can go to the school, and then as a state, we will take steps to assist the universities to function. This is not difficult to do, and the reasons are simple. One, the key items when dealing with the functioning of a university first is the salaries and emoluments of lecturers. The salaries of the lecturers are already being paid for from the consolidated fund. So if we suspend the payment of fees, it will not affect the salaries of the lecturers. Secondly, if you take the fee schedules and you look at the items, many of the items there can be suspended this year, and it will not affect the functioning of the universities. So just go and take the fees and charges, LI, and then you look at the items, and you see that many of them, SRC dues, what they call it, development fees, IT, entertainment, sports. It is these petty matters that cumulatively give us the figure of 2,500, sometimes 4,000. And if you suspend those ones, it won't affect the functioning of a university in this COVID circumstance. There are those who argue that, when the students come to school, government will give them bursaries and loans. But if the person is not able to pay the fee to come to school, how is he going to apply for the bursary? So my argument is that if indeed there is a budget line for bursaries for students, then government should allow the students to come, so the government will just deploy or apply the budget item for bursaries to pay the universities so that they can function. And secondly, you all know that the GET fund was passed for the purposes of supporting the financing of tertiary education. Principally, even though now we are using a lot of the money for other things that are unrelated to tertiary education. This year, there will definitely be receipts to the GET fund. So we can also allow the students to come, and later on, when we receive monies in the GET fund, the state can apply those funds to support the universities to function effectively. So there are several mechanisms by which we can ensure that the universities function effectively, even when we suspend the application of the fees and charges LI. So I urge bipartisan support. I know many of our friends in the NPP and the Independent, they have constituents who are students, and I believe that they will support the motion. And I believe that this is one of the issues that will unite the House on a policy issue that all of us are very concerned. And I think that this is what will help families and students to be able to go to school this year. Thank you. The private university students may benefit from an arrangement like this is where in the debate, if we're able to make a case for a lump sum allocation to every successful applicant to the universities, if that is successful, then it is possible that students in private universities will benefit. But you see, the reality is that we cannot ask proprietors of private universities to suspend the collection of their monies because they are private entities. We may urge them to reduce the fees given the COVID circumstances, but you can also urge them to reduce it below the running cost of their private enterprises, who then pays the difference for them. So those are issues that we can debate, and I believe that colleagues will bring ideas, and we can extend it to private universities if the House so agrees, because if we all agree and we pass a resolution amending what I have, because I am focusing on public universities and tertiary institutions, mainly because for the public tertiary institutions, government is already paying for the salary of lecturers, and government has already invested in the infrastructure using taxpayers' money. So they have the infrastructure and they have lecturers. The fees help in some ways to run the universities. And I'm saying that we can suspend those fees and the universities will still be able to function. Maybe not optimally, but it will still be able to function. And so that is easier to do. But where somebody has invested in his or her infrastructure and is paying privately lecturers, you can't ask them to suspend all that cost. So they may have to consider reviewing downwards the fees, and we can argue that the state should consider extending some support to students in private universities, a limited amount that will cut across every student who obtains admission into a private university.
In your opinion, how do you think government is going to finance this support?
I already made the point that government is already financing the universities. Government is already paying the lecturers' salaries and some subvention for other things. Government is already investing in the infrastructure of the universities. Now, if you look at the fees and schedule, the Fees and Charges Act or LI, you will see the items. And tomorrow during the debate, I will, show that many of the items there can be suspended and the universities will still function effectively. So it is not so much a question of financing. It is just not allowing the university to take the money. That is what will happen, because some basic needs of the university is already being met by government. And I'm saying that in the context of the COVID, every institution is constrained one way or the other. And to constrain universities a little so that we can enable many poor students to get in will not be far-fetched in this environment. If by the end of next year we resolve these issues, or by the end of this year we resolve these issues, next year we can revert to the fees and charges that we have enacted.
Last one.
Yeah, you should be worried about the fact that, quite apart from the fees, most of these students who are going to the schools are unable to pay for their accommodation. KNUST, for instance, has admitted over 32,000 students, and they have just about 9,000 who can be catered for, together with the continuing students. Most of them are stranded on the campus. If you're asking that school fees should not be taken from them, you should equally be worried about accommodation for these students as well.
Yeah, I mean, the student has two burdens. He has the burden of having to pay the fees before he comes. And then when he comes, he has to pay for accommodation. And all we are saying is that you take one off the shoulders of the student and the family, whilst we struggle with the other one. The fees and charges that are being collected are not collected necessarily to invest in hostels for the students. So by not paying that, you are not depriving them of hostels. The infrastructure for hostels already exists in limited supply in some cases, but then the private sector is augmenting that by providing hostels around the schools. But as it is now, that student has to still pay the fees and go and then find money to also pay for the accommodation. And we are saying that lift the burden of the fees off that student and let that person struggle with the payment of hostel accommodation charges. But then there's also something that we could actually do, in my opinion, which is to look at the hostels that have been constructed by private developers on the campuses and engage them to see how we could get them to give discounts to the students, because the land on which they have built the hostels are public lands. And so in computing the cost of the facility, you need to take out the cost of land. And if you take out the cost of land, you should be able to reduce the hostel charge so that the student will be able to bear the cost. So those are things that even beyond just the fees and charges, the administrators of universities can engage private developers of hostels on campuses and deal with the issue.